You know, it really is getting like you just can't make this shit up anymore. Now, before I go on, full disclosure, I am a liberal. But I'm not really sure whether that makes me a liberal of the left or a liberal of the right. Allow me to explain. At a much earlier point in my life, my liberal political understanding basically came down to gay people being allowed to be gay and people being able to wear whatever they like. Except, since growing up and learning a little bit more about the world, I've also begun to understand that in the present day, being liberal also means being emotionally charged when trying to have a basic conversation about reality. That religion and the afterlife can be replaced by a religion of organic food, natural products, yoga, and a retarded fear of chemicals. That the only way to truly appreciate this world is by living off-grid, even though you probably learnt about that way of life via the fucking internet on your smartphone that you just can't stop using to obsess over the highly edited photographic record of other people's lives. That all men are potential rapists. That governments apparently don't care, even though you're happy for the government to come in and control what other people do if you don't agree with their opinion. That the condemnation of undesirable behaviours like rape, public executions, and the subjugation of minority groups within minority groups is racist. And that it's some sort of modern-day sin to acknowledge that male and female are really a thing. But one significant thing I've come to notice about all the self-described do-gooders of the world is that they often lie and cheat and allow bad people to get away with bad things despite all the hard work that a lot of people are doing to address some really complex issues. And that brings me round rather nicely to the Southern Poverty Law Centre. The Southern Poverty Law Centre have listed Maajid Nawaz as an anti-Muslim extremist.
Get the fuck out of here.
The Southern Poverty Law Centre, or SPLC, is an American non-profit legal advocacy organisation specialising in civil rights and public interest litigation. Based in Montgomery, Alabama, it is noted for its successful legal cases against white supremacist groups, its classification of hate groups and other extremist organisations, and its educational programmes that promote tolerance. So why on earth would a civil rights group list an ex-Islamist Muslim as an anti-Muslim extremist? Perhaps the leader of the SPLC's intelligence project, Heidi Birch, can tell us why.
Let me just give you an example of Maajid Nawaz's problem with him. He believes that all mosques should be surveilled. In other words, his opinion is that all Muslims are potential terrorists. That is problematic for us and is something that we don't think is fair if you're having a discussion about Muslims and terrorism.
Right.
First of all, in acknowledgement that most of the attacks are coming from people that are motivated by a twisted interpretation of Islam, it sounds sensible. The problem is, of course, that like Christianity, Islam or Muslims don't have any one particular ethnicity, age or gender background, and specifically terrorists don't. So if we start profiling looking for Muslims, all we're doing is telling terrorists exactly what we're looking for so they can start training potential suicide bombers not to fit the profile, as they've done on many, many occasions.
Ah, well, maybe if we look at the SPLC's website, that'll clear a few things up a bit. Maajid Nawaz is a British activist and part of the ex-radical circuit of former Islamists who used that experience to savage Islam. Excuse me? Savage Islam? What the fuck am I reading?
Religion and dogma generally presents a level of challenges. It presents certain issues, but what I'm talking about, terrorism, is essentially a modern phenomenon. The phenomenon of suicide bombings and launching oneself into crowded places to kill everyone within Muslim-majority countries has emerged in relatively modern times.
Right.
So something extra had to have happened to this 1400-year-old religion, and that's what I call the ideological narrative. Islamism is derived from the religion of Islam. However, it's also an amalgamation of many, many other ideas that came from outside of the religion of Islam as well.
His story, which has been told repeatedly to the British and American press, and in testimony to legislators as well, sounds compelling enough. What? Who the fuck wrote this? A spurned lover? What's been happening? Has Maajid been going around southern parts of USA breaking hearts and intimate promises? Show some bloody decorum, for fuck's sakes. Major elements of his story have been disputed by former friends and members of his family, fellow jihadists and journalists, and the evidence suggests that Nawaz is far more interested in self-promotion and money than in any particular ideological dispute. The evidence suggests, does it? Show me your sources. There have been various biased articles disputing some of the claims that Maajid has made about his life. Articles pumped out on spurious websites with loaded or suggestive titles such as Alternet, a site known to have an extreme left-wing bias and a factual reporting rating of mixed. His Quilliam Foundation received more than £1.25 million from the British government, but the government eventually decided to stop funding it. Brilliant. Meanwhile, over on this side of the pond...
I think it's a bit rich that Maajid Nawaz, he says that he can't profile young people, just because they have hoodies or whatever, but his organization profiles Muslims who have orthodox beliefs, and he calls them extremists, and he's a government-funded stooge, government-funded stooge, government-funded stooge, attacking Muslims.
What? If we're going to criticise the man, can we at least be geographically consistent? Quilliam's ideas, projects and output are all made possible by the support of private individual donations, private philanthropic foundations and trust grants. All funding is accounted for responsibly and we are externally audited annually. Quilliam sets its own agenda. Indeed, it has turned down funding offers from potential donors a number of times in the past precisely because of concerns that the donors would try to influence Quilliam's agenda. Quilliam is not affiliated to any political party and its staff and board members are politically diverse. Quilliam is concerned with issues beyond the level of party politics. Likewise, although Quilliam advises the government and advised the previous government, it remains objective and often critical. Governments are right to empower and fund civil society to carry out counter-extremist work, and we are not opposed in principle to receiving public funds, as long as our values-based approach is not compromised. One of Nawaz's biggest purported coups was getting anti-Muslim extremist Toby Robinson to quit as head of the violence-prone English Defence League, trumpeting his departure at a press conference.
Hearing how Maajid argued so vehemently against Mo about basic human rights was a revelation to Tommy.
I didn't think a Muslim would confront Mo Ansar because I thought Mo Ansar was being built as the acceptable face of Islam. And that's everything that I think is wrong. So when I saw this and I read more up about Quilliam and I looked at what Quilliam has done, I looked about they've actually brought change.
This isn't about publicity. Both of us have sacrificed to be in this position, but both of us passionately believe in what? In an inclusive, united Britain, where Muslims and non-Muslims can all live together in peace and harmony.
So unless Maajid is some sort of wizard with a time machine, I don't really see how it's even possible to claim that it was him that convinced Tommy to change his mind, but I guess that's just one of those tiny little details that we don't need to trouble ourselves with. The main problem, though, other than this bitchy little hit piece, is that the SPLC's reasons for listing Maajid as an extremist appear to keep changing. If we look back through the SPLC's archive, we can see that in 2016, one of the reasons that they mentioned was that Maajid calls for an outright ban on the niqab. The source they cited for this claim is from a Daily Mail article back in 2013. However, in that article, Maajid explains that the removal of a vow should only happen when entering identity-sensitive environments such as banks, airports, courts and schools. It also happens to be the very same article where Maajid clearly states, "I do not believe in an outright ban on the niqab." Well, fuck a duck. It's almost as if they don't even attempt to be accurate.
I am no supporter of the niqab nor the burqa, and I will continue to speak out against it. But let me tell you what I also think is thoroughly un-British. In fact, is an imitation, a pale imitation of the very tendency, of the very desire that theocrats have when telling people how to dress, when enforcing their views on others. What I think is also very un-British is that I have an opinion on the burqa and the niqab, and that I should somehow force this opinion onto other people through legislation, that I should somehow ban certain dress codes for men or women, or that I should somehow enforce certain dress codes for men or women. I think that's thoroughly un-British because it's thoroughly illiberal.
If you look at the SPLC's most up-to-date listing, this reason can no longer be seen. How curious. Also back in 2016, The Guardian reported on a story about Maajid being spotted signing photographs at a neo-Nazi hate convention. Not really. He was at a strip club for his bachelor party. The SPLC wrote, Nawaz, who described himself as a feminist, was filmed repeatedly trying to touch naked lap dancers, according to an April 10, 2015 report in the Daily Mail. The paper apparently got the security film from the owner of the strip club, who was incensed by Nawaz's claims to be a religious Muslim. Other than the fact that any intelligent person realises that if you do try to touch up a lap dancer, you're going to end up in an alleyway with a set of broken legs. 1. If feminism is supposed to be about the right for women to choose what they want to do with an equal level of respect, then I really do not understand how it is in any way anti-feminist for a woman to decide to take up a spot of lap dancing, or for somebody to decide to take up a spot of watching them. 2. Maajid has said on a number of occasions that he is not a devout Muslim and doesn't hold himself up as an example.
Are you an observant Muslim today?
I would not hold myself out as a role model for anyone who's religious. I'm a Muslim, I believe in Islam, but I don't put myself out as devout in any shape or form.
3. Regardless of what any of us choose to do in our adult, consenting personal lives, what the fuck has any of that got to do with being an anti-Muslim extremist? Significantly, the owner of the strip club, who just couldn't contain himself over his incredulous anger about Maajid being a religious Muslim, was himself a religious Muslim. Brilliant. So, other than being a fucking hypocrite, before leaking the footage to the press, he also wrote a status on Facebook saying that he wanted to punish Maajid for being an atheist. The owner of the strip club, Shah Jahan, wrote via an account that has since been deleted, I have a very interesting story regarding this fraud. Who can I contact to get this out? I was reluctant to let this out as we should cover for another Muslim's sins. But he's an atheist now, so we good. Well, there you have it. Atheists are fair game. Shah Jahan was promptly redirected by known caliphate-supporting Islamist Dili Hussein to make contact via his infamous regressive 5 Pillars blog. Dili Hussein is the type of modern-day progressive Muslim who calls women fat cows and pissheads, and that they spout drunken liberal garbage. That's at least the treatment that Mina Topia received after having the audacity to say she wouldn't agree with any state which tries to curtail anyone's rights based on their religion, their sexuality, their creed, or their political leanings. And it's no big surprise that Huffington Post are still giving Dili a platform. What a guy. Now, when we look at the Southern Poverty Law Centre's most recent listing, surprise, surprise, that reason can now no longer be seen either. Yet the accusation of extremist still remains. This time, a new reason has been added. But this time, Maajid is being criticised for something that someone else has said. Ed Hussein of the Quilliam Foundation said collecting intelligence on people not accused of crimes is good and it is right if the purpose is to prevent people getting killed and committing terrorism, according to an October 16, 2009 story in The Guardian. He added that this kind of intelligence gathering outweighs civil liberties concerns. That's the name of the game, he said. It's not about doing the right thing by Islamists or liberal do-gooders. It's about creating a society where liberal do-gooders survive freely. Ed Hussein is quite clearly talking about people under suspicion and not gathering intelligence on any random Muslim you happen to find in a library or at the bus stop. Then, after that, they rather confusingly quote Maajid directly, where he states, no one, least of all Quilliam, advocated a police state or spying on Muslims en masse as a community. So it turns out that the Southern Poverty Law Centre take issue with surveillance. Unless they want to incriminate somebody for being in a strip club, of course.
Yes! Yes! Oh, yeah! Can you feel that, buddy? Huh?
Can I ask you, who would you look for? When you're saying we're looking for Muslims, would you look for Adam Gaddan, the American white Al-Qaeda spokesperson in America? Would you look for Muriel Demacoq, who's a Belgian white woman who was the first suicide bomber? Hold on, the first suicide bomber in Iraq was a Belgian white woman. The Black Widows in Chechnya who invaded a theater in Moscow who were wearing jeans and T-shirts. Who would you look for? What does a Muslim look like? That's the question.
They also noted down, clutching at straws here, that Maajid tweeted a cartoon picture of Muhammad, except they choose to completely miss the point. The point being, this Jesus and Mo cartoon is not offensive, and I'm sure God is greater than to feel threatened by it. Whether drawing Muhammad is frowned upon or not all depends on which type of Muslim you are. But there go leftists, tarring everyone with the same fucking brush again. You know, I think I've worked out why the Southern Poverty Law Centre have got such an issue with gathering intelligence. It's because they're fucking shit at it! And come on, I don't mean to be horrible or anything, right? But just look at that face. Fucking hell. Hardly the quintessential image of happiness, is it? You wouldn't put that on the front of a brochure, would you? That's all I'm saying. That's the type of face that says to me that this person has always wanted to be on someone's list, you know, like a guest list or a wedding list or some shit, but she never made the grade, and now she's grown up like some sort of anti-hero, and she just sits there year after year thinking to herself, list? You want a list? I'll give you a fucking list! And now she literally compiles lists of hate. Brilliant. Heidi, do you not realise that you actually add to hate by accusing people of hate and causing those people to be attacked by the hateful haters of alleged hate? What on earth do you think you're playing at, Heidi, you fucking sponge? Now, it's not as though Maajid is new to criticism. He gets criticised all the time. The left think he's an anti-Muslim extremist and the right think that he's a closet terrorist. So really, it all comes down to what sort of agenda you have rather than an appreciation for the facts. Now obviously we could all just sit back and laugh about this sort of thing. However, due to the Southern Poverty Law Centre's level of influence, it's actually a hell of a lot more serious than that. Earlier this year, somebody opened fire at a Republican congressional baseball game. Back in 2012, somebody opened fire at the Family Research Council. Both of these attackers were influenced by the Southern Poverty Law Centre, and one of these attackers was even helped out by the Southern Poverty Law Centre's own hate map. Basically, the Southern Poverty Law Centre helped cut out some of the hassle of this sort of thing.
Johnson, Navenar, sounds like a typical bastard.
Now, how did you, this building, this organization, how did you find it, or did you like look it up online, or how did you know about it?
Southern Poverty Law lists anti-gay groups. I found them online.
Okay.
A little bit of research onto their website and stuff like that.
People's lives are being put at risk due to shit research and a rather criminal attitude towards honesty. And if you also think that this sort of thing can't be allowed to go on, then by all means, help Maajid Nawaz's crowdfund by taking legal action against the Southern Poverty Law Centre, and you can do that by popping over to his website at maajidnawaz.com. That's the latest from me, and I'll catch you lot next time.
I went to men in prison who had been in prison since I was 3 years old, and then I met them at 24, and they had abandoned their previous terrorist ideology, and I had the arrogance to try and convince them that they had sold out, that they didn't understand that true Islam was a religion of war. And they said to me, young lad, come and sit down, we'll tell you a story or two. And over the course of the 4 years, after having learnt Arabic, after having memorized half of the Quran, after having studied the theology, though myself not being too much of a religious man, I came to the conclusion that Islam had been hijacked and abused and politicized by something that I now refer to as Islamism, the modern ideology that owes more to post-World War I European fascism than it does to the traditions of Islam.
I would certainly focus on both Trump's apparent acquiescence at a member of his audience in one of his debates, when somebody suggested that Muslims need to be dealt with across America, and Ben Carson's comments that you've just referred to. For me, look, the issue is very clear, and Sam and I agreed with this in our dialogue. The issue, the challenge, the problem is certainly not Muslim Americans. In fact, you know, and it's worthwhile mentioning, the American public is less likely to vote for atheists than they are for a Muslim president. So in fact, both those groups face incredible degrees of discrimination. But they are not the problem. The problem is those who politicize their view of religion. The problem are those Islamists that we name. And I'd like to make that very clear in the form of a question to either Trump or Ben Carson, and present liberal Muslims as an example of people that could be incredibly good presidents of the United States if they were ever given that opportunity.
I've memorized half of the Quran. I'm a Muslim. I'm born and raised a Muslim to a Muslim family. I learned classical Arabic. I spent time in prison as a political prisoner fighting for what I then thought was my religion. I've changed my views as to the interpretation of my religion. And along come these people in sweet Alabama and decide that I don't have the right to speak about my own heritage and critique it from within.
And when did criticism of a religion equal bigotry?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, these guys, these are the same guys who arrogate to themselves the right to speak out against the Bible Belt, right? So the Southern Poverty Law Center is quite vocal against family planning, the anti-abortionist movement, quite vocal against Christian fundamentalists. In fact, they've listed some Christian conservative groups on their hate lists as well. So they arrogate to themselves the right to criticize their own Bible Belt, but don't want me to criticize our Quran Belt within my own community.
Right.